For years in the United States, one of the primary and most vocal causes of the American right, of American conservatism, has been a defense of free speech and a denunciation of the various forms of censorship proliferating in the United States, both the soft form of censorship that takes root and finds expression in things like cancel culture, where people are fired or vilified or denied access to places because the political views they expressed are deemed warranting punishment, or the more formal kind, such as when the United States government pressures big tech or even requires big tech and forces big tech to ban certain political opinions from being heard online. And yet, ever since October 7th, it is largely the Republican Party and the American right that has decided that one of the ways for politicians to get more popular, to get more attention for themselves, to become more powerful, is to exploit the anger over the Hamas attack, as well as the anger toward various individuals and groups in the United States exercising their First Amendment right to defend the Palestinians, to criticize Israel, even on some occasion, although this is a minority of people doing it, a small minority defending Hamas, but they have the right to express those views, have decided that one of the ways that they need to show people that they mean business is to advocate for all new forms of censorship, attacks on free speech, limiting the range of views that Americans are permitted to be heard and to express themselves on a crucial political issue, which is the question of Israel and Palestine, which is now a crucial issue precisely because the Biden administration, with bipartisan support, second straight war where the Biden administration got involved and has bipartisan support, the first, of course, being the war in Ukraine, has decided that it is going to feed and fund and arm the Israelis in this war the way it was doing for Ukraine in its war, and that not only will it do that, but it also is deploying aircraft carriers and other military hardware to the region and threatening to get involved if either Hezbollah or Iran or other regional actors starts to attack Israel as well. So if you're an American citizen, you not only have the right, but the duty to regard this as a crucial debate and to express your views on that debate. And the First Amendment is there to safeguard your right to do that, to express the views, even that the majority of people in the society might consider repellent. That's the whole point of the free speech guarantee in the First Amendment. And yet, every single day it seems like, prominent politicians or prominent pundits insist that free speech has gone too far, we need to rein it in, and they're using exactly the same arguments that the left liberal advocates of censorship have spent years invoking in defense of their censorship campaigns. And I know that because I've spent the last years fighting with them and arguing with them. And now when I fight and argue with conservative censorship advocates, I feel like I'm arguing with the mirror image of that other group. They're offering exactly the same theories. Oh, these views aren't really free speech. They're over the line. These opinions are too hateful to permit. They're too dangerous. They're too likely to incite violence against marginalized minorities. They're making members of marginalized groups so uncomfortable and feeling unsafe. So we have to protect those people, especially on campuses, from hearing those views. It's all the same thing. Yesterday, Governor Ron DeSantis, who is governing Florida, but also waging a very, at least so far, unsuccessful presidential campaign to become the Republican presidential nominee, announced, as Reuters here reported in the headline, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis bans a pro-Palestinian group from state campuses. Quote, Florida's university system, working with Governor Ron DeSantis, ordered colleges on Tuesday to shut down a pro-Palestinian student organization, marking the first U.S. state to outlaw the group whose national leadership backed Hamas's attack on Israel. Now note, this group didn't, but their national chapter said, we think Hamas's attack on Israel was justifiable. Now, you obviously may find that repellent. I do. But there's no question you have the right to say, I think Israel is entitled to kill every last Gazan, as some people are saying. I think Israel is not only entitled, but should destroy all of Gaza and turn it into a parking lot and kill them all. We've shown you protesters saying that. That too is repellent, but that too is free speech. And so is saying, I think Hamas was sufficiently justified because of the repression that the Israelis have imposed on the Palestinians. Again, repellent though it might be, That's the liberal argument, is once a view is so repellent, it needs to be banned as hate speech. Quote, the State University System of Florida said chapters of Students for Justice in Palestine had to be dismantled as part of a quote, crackdown in the Republican-led state on campus demonstrations that provide, quote, harmful support for terrorist groups. Quote, based on the national SJP's support of terrorism in consultation with Governor DeSantis, the student chapters must be deactivated, the system's chancellor Ray Rodriguez wrote in a memo to university leaders. DeSantis, a candidate for the Republican Party's presidential nomination, has taken a hard line against Palestinians, suggesting Gazan civilians be denied water and utilities until Hamas releases hostages it took during its attack. Now, a lot of people find that repellent. Advocating that children, which remember is the majority of the people of Gaza, people under 18, be denied access to food, clean drinking water, and medications and fuel so that families are alive under rubble but can't be rescued because there's no fuel to remove the rubble. Doctors in Gazan hospitals are operating on people, including children, with no anesthesia because medication can't enter Gaza. There are children who are having limbs amputated because of infections they got from drinking dirty drinking water, which is the only water available. And their limbs are being amputated to prevent the spread of that infection to the rest of the body because there's no antibiotics to treat it. And when they amputate, they have to do so without even basic painkillers. So if that's something you advocate as collective punishment on the Palestinians for Hamas's actions, which is supposed to be a war crime under the Geneva Conventions and the post-World War II order, that to me is pretty repellent, but I think Ron DeSantis has the First Amendment right to express it. And yes, I think those are comparable. Quote, Florida's university system said it based its SJP ban on a, quote, toolkit issued by the national organization to chapters that referred to Hamas's attack as, quote, the resistance, and stated Palestinian students in exile are part of this movement. Here is the letter itself, written to the State University System of Florida. It was a letter on October 24th from Roy Rodriguez that began with, during a Jewish holiday, Hamas launched this attack, and Governor DeSantis has condemned the attack. Hamas is responsible. And then it says, in response and leading up to a day of resistance, the National Students for Justice of Palestine released a toolkit which refers to that attack as the resistance and unequivocally states Palestinian students in exile are part of the movement, not in solidarity with the movement. And then they actually accuse these students of committing a felony. They're not charged with any crimes, but they're still accused of committing a felony of knowingly providing material support to a designated terrorist organization. Material support is supposed to be when you give money to a terrorist organization or arms to a terrorist organization, not when your views end up somehow defending what they've done. Your views are sacrosanct in the United States. That's free speech. It then concludes that based on the national SJP support of terrorism in consultation with Governor DeSantis, the student chapters must be deactivated. Now, when you get to a point when elected officials are banning student groups because the views that they express, the political opinions about a war that the United States is now involved in, are criminal, you've entered a very dangerous territory. Thankfully, we have a civil liberties group that can be trusted. It's not the ACLU. We know the ACLU, with some rare exceptions, only invokes civil liberties and free speech causes when doing so advances the Democratic Party and the liberal cause. And one of the ways to avoid copying the failure, the moral failure, and the fraudulent behavior of the ACLU is not to be like them. It's not to weaponize free speech advocacy as a means of defending and advancing your political agenda so that you're only defending free speech when it comes time to views that you support and like, but you're also actually defending free speech when it comes to the views that you hate. That's when it's hardest to do. Everybody will defend free speech when it comes to the views that they like. That's easy to do and meaningless. Thankfully, we have FIRE, and as I said, they built up a lot of credibility with conservatives because they spent years on campuses defending the rights of conservative voices. They've also defended before the rights of Palestinian and pro-Palestinian voices on campus that have been long the target of censorship attacks as well, because that's what it means to be a consistent free speech group. Here is a tweet from Alex Mori. She is the director of the Campus Freech Project of FIRE. And here's what she said about Governor DeSantis' actions. Quote, FIRE urges Florida public universities not to comply with any state order to derecognize campus chapters of Students for Justice in Palestine due to the group's views or ties to the national organization. Silencing students' protected speech violates the First Amendment and it is unlawful. FIRE sent versions of this letter to the University of Florida President Ben Sasse and to presidents at other Florida systems, including Florida State, FIU, FAU, and USF. Florida law, U.S. Congress, and the Supreme Court, see Holder versus Humanitarian Law Project, all define provisions of material support to terrorism as conduct beyond pure speech. DeSantis provides zero evidence the students targeted here engaged in anything other than pure speech. Here's a letter, and by the way, FIRE has a lot of conservative donors, and they're not captive to them. They will denounce attacks on the First Amendment wherever it comes from, and that's why I have so much respect for them. That's the only way to be a First Amendment defender, a genuine free speech believer, a genuine opponent of censorship, is when you invoke it in all cases, regardless of the views being proposed to be silenced. Here's the letter that FIRE wrote to Ben Sasse. You may remember him. He used to be the Trump criticizing senator from Nebraska in the Republican Party. He left to become president of the Florida State University system. And there you see some of the text. FIRE is deeply concerned by reports that Florida's public universities, including the University of Florida, have been ordered by state university system chair Roy Rodriguez at the behest of Ron DeSantis to derecognize campus chapters for Students for Justice in Palestine due to their affiliation with National Students for Justice in Palestine, which distributed a guide to protest to its student chapters. By unsupportably alleging that communications about campus protests from the national organization to its campus chapters constitutes material support for Hamas's terrorist activities overseas, the order unlawfully threatens students' clear, expressive, and associational rights under the First Amendment. To avoid violating clearly established law, University of Florida must not comply with the order. Denial of group recognition based on viewpoint, speech, or fear of disruption violates the First Amendment, particularly with regard to a campus chapter group's ties to a national organization. So the letter is incredibly steadfast and vocal. And it even says it's not only that you're trying to ban them, but accusing them of criminal liability when all you can prove is that they express views that you don't dislike. That is what the First Amendment is there for. Now, I know, as we've been saying, that a lot of you feel strongly about the war in Israel and about Israel itself. Don't let that emotion be exploited by politicians to convince you that the Constitution needs to be suspended. It's bad enough when that happens because of wars the United States is involved in. This is not a war the United States is involved in. This is not our war. This is Israel's war. And it's far worse to exploit a foreign war to try and limit and abridge the free speech rights or other constitutional rights of American citizens. Thanks for watching this clip from System Update, our live show that airs every Monday through Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on Rumble. You can catch the full nightly shows live or view the backlog of episodes for free on our Rumble page. You can also find full episodes the morning after they air across all major podcasting platforms, including Spotify and Apple. All the information you need is linked below. We hope to see you there.